Make every night a wonderful journey, no matter where you are. Here is your harbor of the soul. Good night, sweet dreams. The first story. Males, they say that the hour of 3 a.m. is the time when spirits can become active, and I'm sure of that. My apartment was always a little too quiet for one in the city, especially at night. No drunk shouting in the street at time. No sound of car horns and alarms could penetrate the dark at that particular hour. It's like my apartment was high on a platform, surrounded only by a dense fog that the sharpest of hawk eyes couldn't penetrate. I was usually attempting to sleep at that time, after bleaching my skin, in the pure electric light of my computer screen. Emphasis on the phrase attempting, because from that stems this tale. I advise you, if you've been here long enough to find it, you'll soon discover of what I'm talking about. I should really tell you anyway, just so you know you're not insane. I know I'm not. Every night for the past 4 months, a strange sound would pierce the strange blur that surrounded my home, or maybe just my mind. I have searched the apartment many times for it, but behind the hollow-sounding ivory walls and hard pine floors, I couldn't find any source. The sound, at first, was like scratching if you have fingernails. Drag them along a table. Like that. It was slow, and every time I heard it, I froze up. It wasn't as dramatic as anything like ghostly moaning or anything like that, but it still scared me so much I reverted to childhood and stuck my head under the blanket. During the day I worked at what could possibly be the most boring place on earth, a factory that stamped out since they didn't even need workers. But I really didn't care. It paid the bills, and getting to sit around until someone needed help fixing the machine wasn't too bad. I sort of miss it. There was always something bad happening though. In retrospect, I feel as though it was following me. For instance, a man's hand ended up being caught in the stamping machine under a sheet of aluminum. The crunch was sickening. It sounded like a dog chewing upon a bone, that same splintering sound. Every night, I would retire from this slightly gory boredom to my apartment, back to my beloved computer. The cycle was always the same work. Computer, scratching sound. I never really thought to ask anyone about it. I would usually forget about it by morning. But one day I didn't. I sat there in my folding chair at work, surrounded by the drab, bleak grey concrete walls, a long-ignored cigarette that was gradually becoming one trembling tower of ashes in my grasp, trying to think of a way to discover whatever this thing was. Why wouldn't I just follow it, get my nerves together, and find the continual source of fear? For me, it made me cold just at the thought, but I knew I had to do it. So that night, I turned off the computer as usual, but then took one extra step. I grabbed a flashlight. It would be faster than dashing across the room to my light switch. It could even be mice. I thought to myself as I slipped into bed, wearing the hero's garb of any sleepy man, a pair of boxers and socks. At least if I ran crying out of the building, a few people could get a laugh. The clock slowly began to head towards 3 o'clock. My heart began to pound nervously like a sword. I held the turned-off flashlight to my bare chest. The necklace around my neck felt strangely cold, even though I had at least 3 comforters on. Oh, the joys of a particularly cold winter. Closing my eyes, I heard the scratching. Slowly it got louder. My hand began to shake, but I kept my eyes shut. Why wasn't I turning on the light? Why wasn't I looking? Because there was a new sound, a tinkling, strange shaking, like a maraca full of metal instead of beans or beads. A loud thunk against my door made me leap up, turning on the flashlight. I managed to run to the light switch and flick it on as well. With an icy, trembling hand, I opened the door. What I saw will never leave my mind. There was the source of my fear. The thing that had somehow invaded my home, an oddly small, waif-like creature, like a starving child with skin that was too pale. It was like a corpse dropped in water, for its skin was tinged with blue, every vein was visible. Oh, how I wanted to gag at the sight. But it gets worse. Strategically placed in this demented creature's flesh, long metal nails were embedded through the tips of its fingers and toes, sticking out of its neck and shoulders, down its chest, and out of its eyes. They were everywhere. How loudly I screamed. I didn't know would anyone hear it through the fog surrounding my house. Would I hear it? I couldn't stop staring. The dried, cracking blood against the decaying flesh brought up my earlier meal, and a gushing hot river of vomit poured out of my mouth onto the ground. I backed up as the creature took a step. Its lank hair was missing in chunks, and as it stepped closer, its feet dragged upon the floor, the nails in them making a scratching sound. Why, I had to keep my room in a state of continual chaos. I don't know, but the mess was astounding. Of course, I fell scrambling back. I stared in horror at the dead thing. It didn't move right. I realized it didn't just walk. Its motions were snappy and disjointed, and one foot dragged behind it while the other advanced towards me in his hand. There was a heavy, rusted hammer, dripping with what I hoped was water. It was slightly rust-colored. I couldn't bear to see it. But in the other, there was a plastic grocery bag that sagged and poked out with the weight within it, like if someone hung a porcupine from a diaper. I felt the wall against my back. The creature moved forward. I was paralyzed with fear at the sight of it. It was so grotesque in front of me. It stopped. I noticed the puncture marks upon its tiny calves where the nails were, and I felt a strange sense of pity. The bag in its hand split a little, and the sight of what was within made me let out an audible, and most likely bile-scented groan. A nail jutted out. I cried out loud. The thing pounced upon me as I felt the first nail go into my eye. It was worse through the blood blocking my vision. I could see its tiny mouth pull back in a widely toothed smile, the nails in its lips making them split and gush rotten black blood down onto me. I moaned in pain as another nail entered my second. I swatted, but it was to no avail. Perhaps it would be over soon. Perhaps death would be better than being tormented by this rotten thing. But still, the nails entered. Still, I cried out loudly, especially when I was dragged. I couldn't see where, but damn, it hurt. It's gone now. The nail child. I don't know where it went. Well, I know somewhere. It will be coming out at 3 o'clock. And so will I. I think you ought to check your clock, because it looks like this bag in my hand is about to split. I'm so excited to see you. The second story, Diary of a Madman, May 260, 2009. Hello, Diary. My name is Daniel Franklin. I just got this leather-bound beauty of a book. In a garage sale, its covers are smooth and black, the pages yellowed and antique in texture, no doubt a detail I will become fond of as time goes on. Now, I already like it. Gives the book a classical feel, such a delightful thing. Don't you agree? But I digress. Today was just full of ventures to break the rut into which my life had sunk. First, I tried the new eatery on 8th, and then I bought this book at an old out-of-the-way garage sale in Eatonville. Such a kind old woman selling them. And the cookies she gave to buyers were just delicious. I may go back just to get one, if not to acquire the recipe itself. Well, my kid Bartolome is keeping me company tonight, and I must cut this first, rather short entry to a close. I hope to update this with the memoirs of my life many times. May 270, 2009. Hello diary. Daniel again today was as boring as usual. Even my favorite book couldn't alleviate the cloud of boredom over my head. I'm starting to find my best friend, Mark, to be a tad annoying. Mark is nothing special. Normal American family man from the suburbs. Is there something wrong with me? If I start to think some human beings as disposable, it earlier crossed my mind how uninteresting some of the robotic creatures I liked to keep in my company really are. Ashley with her endless list of pet names for her latest boy toy. Stuart is mumbling about the paranormal, UFOs and the like, though his theories are interesting. They're still about the same thing every day. Is it really wrong to think of these beings as just packs of meat that shouldn't have even been given a working brain? Death will be a mercy to them once they reach that fateful day. Wait. What am I writing? These are my friends. What the hell came over me? Well, I did stop by the sweet old woman's house today. We shared a plate of some of those delectable cookies with some tea, the flavor of which I just couldn't place. Such a sweet old woman. It is too bad much of her family is dead or has forgotten about her. Her name is Susan Anderson, and her home is filled with so many curiosities from the ages of old, and it just fascinates me so. I must go back there again sometime. I must pull this entry to a close. I am still asking myself how I could think such horrible things as I did about my closest co-workers. May 280, 2009. Diary. I am going to be rambling tonight. I woke up because of I don't know if this was a bad dream or a good dream. I remember it so vividly, even though dreams have almost never stuck in my head since the days of my puberty, and many of them were less confusing and a little more wet. This one was strange, felt more like a memory than a dream, though before I hadn't been aware of such a memory. It was when I was barely 5 years old. I was the son of the town butcher. My teenage sister at the time loved me, and I loved her. I never knew she was sad in any way. She always seemed happy enough. I never knew her true thoughts. Even as I write this, I still don't understand. In my dream, I was toddling through the house, but something struck me as being amiss. One of Daddy's knives was missing. I looked up at the wooden knife block, seeing the curious gap in the row of black grips. Daddy always said to tell him when there was a knife gone from his counter. For whatever reason, I didn't pay attention to his rule and continued on in my dream. Suddenly, I was pushing my way into my sister's room. She was on her bed, her arms hanging off of each side of her bed, dripping with some dark red liquid. It looked almost like juice. I walked over and dragged my finger across one of the pools of red liquid before placing my finger in my mouth and sucking. It was not a pleasant taste, rather. It tasted like some of those shavings left over when Daddy sharpened his knives. The rest seemed to happen in slow motion. Mommy walked in and found us. She screamed and fell on the bed over my sissy. I tugged on her dress. "What's wrong, Mommy?" "Sissy's just sleeping and she made juice." That's all I remember of the dream. It was chilling. I remember it, and I think I will continue to think about it. I can't shake. It is an actual memory that I put behind me. I can still taste the juice in the dream. It tasted heavily of iron, but also sweet. June 90, 2009. Diary. I have an explanation as to why I have been absent. Mark has died. He got in a car crash and bleed to death, oh God. Poor little Justine. She's going to be 5 next weekend. Now she doesn't have a father with whom to spend her birthdays. Mona, his wife, is a wreck. His funeral service is on Sunday. I will miss him dearly. I've known him since we were both just in kindergarten, you see. I have been like a ghost these past couple of days. The boss told me to take some days off from work at the office, at least until after the funeral. It will be hard to cope with this loss, but I believe I will come through all this with my head held high. A small trickle of blood is shown on the side of the page. Oh my, a paper cut. Such trivial little things, tiny, thin. They heal in less than an hour if they are treated right, but they bleed like the dickens. Until they do AGH, that memory. They only sting, but you can always feel them nagging at you. For the time they're there also. The blood. It has that same taste of the blood in my memory. Most people find the taste too metallic. No one tastes the sweet side of the bodily fluid. What am I saying? It is revolting. Such a barbaric thing to do. Drink blood. To say it's sweet even if it is. June 12, 2009. Diary. I have been fired. I have drunk my own blood. It is delicious, so sweet, so thick. I just love it. I gave it some thought for the last couple of days, and the liquid is almost magical, isn't it? Such a deep red, mysterious, and again, thick. I love it. I would drink all the blood out of my own body if it wouldn't kill me, but now that I gave thought to it, try to keep this new taste of mine at bay was just plain asinine. It is a beautiful thing, prettier than the average rose. Nothing can beat it. Though, my thoughts are now starting to wonder if my own blood tastes this good. How am I to know that other people's blood doesn't taste better? I must find out, let the consequences not sway mine hand. I will have my sweet elixir, my sparkling cider, my red wine. June 150, 2009. 6:00 p.m. Tonight, I will sample another's blood. It will be the sweet old Susan Anderson. She won't be missed anyway, so why not have her be my first? It will be like a mercy to her, being so old and near death already. I bet her blood has aged like sweet, sweet wine. I will bring my 2 closest friends with me, you see. Mark is coming along for this excursion into the night. Along with my sweet sister Alexis, they understand and support me. They know how sweet blood really is. They know that I need it. I crave it. My body yearns for it, yes. With this knife and this glass, they will help me sample the selfishly unshared blood of Susan Anderson. 7:00 p.m. She welcomed me. She thinks I am just here to share another cup of tea. She did not even question the knife and glass. Hell, she even put them on her cabinet, as if on display. Oh well, I do not need a knife. I have this pen, and as everyone says, the pen is mightier than the sword. As I said, I will have her blood. But who says I can't have a little appetizer? Just a simple prick on the finger. That is all I need, yes, yes. Simply delicious. I must have more. The ink has taken on a red tinge, as if tainted by some outside liquid. I must have more. The finger is not enough for me anymore. This is just child's play. Now, Where should I cut to find more? Ah, of course. I've known the answer all along. That dream wasn't just a memory. It was a telling of the future. The veins and arteries in my wrist will have the sweetest mixture. My sweet, sweet sister was just showing me where to find it. My word, this must be the nectar of God himself, just so divine. Blood is the answer to all of my prayers. Large spots of blood drip on the page. I must have more sisters showing me the way. July 12,009. What a pleasant diary, such a nice feel to it. The cover the most exquisite shade of red. The pages old and yellowed, just like some journal back in the times of Lewis and Clark. I simply demanded to know where Susan got it, but all she said was that she had many of the like. She must be rich. Such a book deserves to be put into a display case. She also invited me into her house, where I am now, which is filled with so many oddities. Old guns, shards of plastic grouped with destroyed clocks. She even has a kitchen knife and an exquisite wine glass on one of her cabinets. She led me to a grand bookcase, and I was amazed at the various books lining its shelves. Some of them look centuries old, but the newest one looks like a twin of this one, simply in black. I asked her if I could read some of them, but she simply shook her head with a smile. Oh well, where are my manners? My name is Martin Sampson of Eatonville, Washington, and I cannot wait to write the memoirs of my life on these welcoming yellow pages. The third story, Die Before You Sleep. You ever wonder what happens to you when you die? Well, I have a little idea of it, people. The idea of it, people die at all ages and of all types of causes. Sometimes it's by injury, sometimes it's by disease, but sometimes old men and women just die in their sleep. Sometimes old people just die without warning in their sleep. They were perfectly healthy, just old. There really is no explanation for why they die, but they just die. There was a little test done in the 1950s to see if they could explain this. They took 10 test subjects who were at least 80 years old and asked them if they would stay here in this facility until they died. These people were particularly aged. You could tell they didn't have long left. As each one died, something peculiar happened just before their heart stopped. Their brain readings became incredibly erratic, but they still matched a certain pattern. They matched the pattern of a person having a nightmare. But this was like nothing they've ever seen. These readings were like the readings of someone having the worst nightmare anyone had ever seen. Their faces stayed so perfectly calm, along with their bodies, but they were not calm. But one of the test subjects survived. He seemed like a very resilient man. He had the brain readings, same as the others, but his heart did not stop. Instead, he woke up with a scream and jerked up violently. The scientists rushed to him and asked what had happened. In his mind, he said it was the most terrifying thing anyone could ever see. He said that it was the reason people die in their sleep. He said that dying in your sleep was not peaceful. He said it was the worst experience you could ever have, and as he was about to tell them, his eyes rolled back in his head, and he collapsed onto the bed. He had died from exhaustion. His heart failed completely. The scientists were baffled. The project was stopped there. They refused to put any more people through this experience. The results were locked away, and the project was hidden away from the eyes of the world. It was lost in the government machine, for the public never to see. But one of the scientists was not satisfied with this. Many years later, that same scientist was of the age where he could die in his sleep. He remembered the project years ago. and decided to find out what the old man was about to tell them. He spent quite some time preparing his old heart for anything that could come at it. He wanted to make sure he stayed alive through this. One night he went to sleep, same as always. But this dream was different. He was in the dark, but there was a small light emanating from what seemed to be a bathroom. He seemed to be drawn towards it. He couldn't stop himself from walking towards it. He opened the door. There was one small flickering light, a dirty-looking mirror, a broken-down toilet and a shower, which seemed to be in the same condition. The floor was cold concrete. There was a sink. He felt himself forced to wash his face. It seemed perfectly normal. He looked up from the sink into the mirror and saw himself. He looked perfectly normal as well. He wiped his face off and reopened his eyes and saw his reflection again, but it was much different this time. The person in the reflection seemed to be him, but it was different. It was as if someone had taken him out of the grave around 6 months later. The figure was decayed, but still retained some resemblance to him. The scientist was paralyzed with fear, but not paralyzed enough to stop from fulfilling an incredible urge to reach out towards it. He slowly moved his hand towards the mirror, but instead of having his hand stopped by cold glass, it kept going towards the figure. He whipped his hand back with incredible shock and fear. The figure slowly started to speak. He said in a raspy, degraded version of the scientist's voice, "Everyone has their time. Why you were lucky enough to last this long. But your time has come. Prepare yourself." The figure moved towards him. He looked for any escape whatsoever, but the door had disappeared. He was trapped in that room. His fear completely froze him from any movement. It suddenly rushed at him, screaming with a more terrifying scream than you could have ever imagined in your entire lifetime. As soon as it made contact with him, he woke up. He sat up violently, heaving massive breaths. The scientist realized immediately what he had just experienced. He quickly grabbed a piece of blank paper that was sitting on the desk next to him. He had prepared this beforehand, just in case. He scribbled out these words as quickly as he could, for he knew that his heart was about to collapse. The paper said, DIEBFO, REYOUSLEP. He then threw the paper and pencil down, and expected to die right then, but he didn't. But he looked over to the exit from his room. Standing in that exit was the figure from his nightmare. The figure whispered, "Why, you didn't think you could get away that easily, did you?" The scientist's eyes widened with terrible fear. He managed to whisper, What are you?" The figure rushed towards the side of his bed and whispered in his ear, "I am God." And with those words, the scientist died. The scientist was a lonely man. All of his family was dead, and he had but one friend. Nobody found the body for months. But one day, his friend came to visit. He went to his house and knocked on the door. No answer. After a few seconds, he smelled an incredibly horrid stench coming from the house. He walked around to the back and looked in the bedroom window inside. It was dark, but he could make out the decaying figure of his friend, who had been in there, dead for months. The figure almost exactly matched the one that had caused him to die. He called the cops, and they picked up his body. The cause of death was simply declared old age. But they found the paper next to his bed. It was filed away in evidence, and there were a few local newspaper stories about it. And so everyone kept on believing that dying of old age was natural, and dying in your sleep was the most painless method to go by. Well, good for them.